next presentation is with Oscar on Trust Experience. We look at cyber risk within the digital commerce environment and how this is left absent in some organisations.
Good day, I'm Oscar Stark and thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas with you. I will be taking you on a journey to highlight the importance of something we often take for granted in the digital context, but actually is probably going to be one of organizations' biggest differentiators in the future: trust. A topic that is actually receiving a lot of scrutiny globally as people's paradigms have been pushed aside to make way for more digital engagement off the back of COVID-19. It's the same world where digital is exploited by deepfakes and cyber attacks, while on the other hand, the average business is looking to attract your attention in the hope that you will drive some economic activity with them. In this world where everything is not always as it seems, who do you really trust? Let's start this discussion with the basics of commerce. I'm going to illustrate it off the back of a basic bargain. The chicken farmer and the cheese maker. They want to do a deal. They want to do a trade. Well, to allow them to successfully trade, there are a few things that need to be in play. Firstly, both parties want to ensure that the item to be traded is actually available. And the way they establish that is by eyeballing if the other party actually has the cheese in hand or the chicken in hand. Secondly, they want to ensure that if the bargain goes down, they will receive what they expect out of it. They need to believe that the other person is trustworthy enough to the extent that the trade will actually go through and they can walk away with what the intended outcome is. Looking around them as they stand there to do the trade, both parties sum up the situation, checking if the other party will outrun them if things go pear-shaped. And when the time is right and both feel comfortable that the deal will happen, they step up to make the exchange and go their separate ways. The trick is, with all the uncertainty at play, yet the need to exchange value, a bridge needs to be built in order for both parties to exchange. This bridge is trust. Trust that the intended outcome will be established, as without trust, there is no transaction. Let's move on to examine some of the realities of trust. Although trust is a universally accepted concept, trust levels are not consistent across the globe. The Edelman Trust Barometer is a trust index that highlights trust levels or distrust levels of people across the globe. So, it is interesting to note that the UAE, for instance, is a much more trusting society in comparison to the United Kingdom. But why is this important? Well, if you develop a digital business in the UAE, using trust queues that support transactions in this geographical context, it might not be adequate to support the same transactions in a low trust environment. You might have to add additional trust queues to allow people to transact. Knowing this is quite important. If you want to have your digital business, if one delves a bit deeper into the relationship we have with trust, it becomes clear why consideration of trust is actually quite important. Firstly, people are wired for trust. It is the way we are born, and without it, society falls apart. Secondly, on average, 40% of people do not trust businesses. This means that even with good intent, 4 out of 10 people that your business approaches will not trust you enough to engage. The International Security Forum have put a view that in the next 3 years, trust, or more precisely the lack of trust, will be one of the biggest risks to digital businesses. So just think about that for a moment. Currently, a lot of businesses are investing in their digital transformation. How many of them are considering trust? And in the absence of trust, what kind of value will their digital transformation yield? And lastly, there's a direct relationship between societies where there is higher levels of trust and the economic performance expressed as their GDP. Following on from this, some countries, industries, and technology have recognized the importance of trust and put some deliberate efforts to help embed it into their context. Privacy and cybersecurity legislation has been designed to do just that, inherently support the exchange of value. Industry trust models in healthcare allow for more meaningful engagement and treatment of patients. And in technology, various mechanisms have been created to help support trust engagement, even recognizing that you might have to engage with zero trust in place. So given this flurry of focus around trust and trust-related matters, surely everyone actually gets how important trust is. But does everyone really? So what is trust? Well, it is safe to say that trust is a complex concept, and experts in the field of psychology are not all united in their views around the topic. If we look at a dictionary definition, it paints a picture that there is a firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. In more layman's terms, trust is a belief system underpinned by specific values that supports an outcome for someone or something in future. Trust builds a bridge when the outcome is uncertain. So what should we understand around trust to allow us to influence or even be deliberate in using trust? There are three aspects to trust to simplify the conversation. Firstly, who you are and how you perceive trust. Secondly, what you use to judge trust. And thirdly, how you play out trust situations. And these can be labeled with their supporting trust cues as trust value, how you interpret trust, trust competency, how sure are you that you will obtain the expected outcome and value that you are looking for, and lastly, the trust engagement. Given your past experience, how confident are you that the value transfer will happen based on the situation at hand? These trust cues actually forming the criteria for evaluating the trust experience. So, from this discussion thus far, it's evident that trust is vital to drive engagement for people. So, from its stems, being deliberate about trust stands to benefit an organization. Let's see how these examples compare, measured against trust cues. In the first example, the customer engages with a known actor, the call center. They have an appreciation of what will happen to allow them to be able to transact, and have confidence that they will make it through the authentication process, as there's previous experience of this. Frankly, people hardly complain that they can't make it through their bank's authentication process. So the net effect is positive and trust is maintained. In the second example, the customer is caught off guard with the new authentication process, which was not communicated to the customer. So, mustering up some courage, the customer attempts to complement the engagement. But as the first question comes through, when did you register your mortgage? The customer hits a panic and is uncertain. Tries to recall when it happened, recognizing that he's had the loan for 7 years. He manages to recall the year, but the actual date not, which results in him failing the question. Now the customer is growing weary that he might not make it through the authentication process. The next question comes through as to where did you buy your last cup of coffee? Now the customer is trying to retrace their steps over the last week, but the week was a bit hectic. Their kids were sick, the car broke down, and more of everything else is a bit of a blur. So the customer guesses, but gets it wrong. And strike two. Now the customer reckons he has no chance to get through to conclude their business. Actually, the customer starts wondering if they found the correct number and that they're perhaps not dealing with a fraudster call center. Come to think of it, perhaps this is the last straw and motivates the customer to start looking at moving their bank. The net result is that the customer is now starting to distrust their bank and frankly starts harboring negative feelings towards their bank. So what can we do to circumvent this from happening? And I want to introduce you to the trust experience. In short, the trust experience creates the ability to instill trust in an experience. How can one think about this? Well, the concept of user experience and customer experience has been well developed over time. The trust experience is just another layer that one wants to bring into the customer journey through ensuring that you consider the various trust cues and their impact through each stage of the customer journey. This resulting in the design being deliberate to instill trust, as opposed to ignoring it, which is more common practice today. So, dropping back to our example, what could have been done to change the trust experience for the customer? Starting by taking a customer perspective would have gone a long way to appreciate that the authentication process might not work. It's also worth understanding human behavior and that we do have our off days. So planning how to deal with it would improve the trust engagement. Spend time educating your customer. Taking an example of in the banking space, 2 decades ago when internet banking started, adoption levels were quite low. The solution banks found was educating customers on what internet banking is and how they could trust it. This significantly changed the adoption of internet banking. And lastly, think about how you would handle the customer when they don't make it through the authentication process, so that you can still manage their trust levels. So in conclusion, it is evident that people are wired for trust, and ignoring it would be detrimental. As without it, there will be no transactions. Trust is unfortunately a complex subject, but this is no reason to ignore it. So rather be deliberate about designing it into your customer journey and driving your trust experience, especially if you are running a digital business. Why? Well, trust is directly linked to economic outcomes, and economic outcomes is what business is all about.